Yeah, we have been talking before about storytelling and the principles of how to make a good story, and we have talked about Aristotle and his poetics, which when painters wondering about what to paint and what should I do in a composition, and then you go to Aristotle and his poetics and you find this composition. It's a poem that is composed of characters performing actions. And then you have a very simple explanation, tells you the order of how things should go. And that's a plot, and then it's the characters that are composed when they are performing actions, and that's very clear, so it doesn't leave like kind of any space for any doubt. And then when you talk to me about Robert McKee and his book Story, you have to read this, because here there's something here that you will find familiar. And I'm reading it. I'm going through it, so I have not finished it yet. And I found that there are so many familiar things that that can be. Of course, they are useful for filmmaking and script writing, but there are so many of his observations and points that he made that can be brought into painting, since we are just making the same storytelling.
Yeah, I think the fantastic thing about Robert McKee's story, and of course, and that goes for Save the Cat also, Blake Snyder, is that you get into a field which is focused solely on storytelling. They are aware of that is their function, their job, and it's not about what I want to say, but what would happen in this situation. If this person does that, what does the other person do, and so onwards. And you need to know the technicalities to achieve a drive in the story. So there's no of this art neurosis hindering you. No, I mustn't be sentimental or anything like that. No. So I think it is it's so liberating.
Yeah.
To read this, and I think it will be for many classical figurative painters to suddenly hear someone talking about storytelling and not excusing themselves or feeling that they're lesser or are of lesser worth or anything like that. So that's just that sort of confirmation that you can tell a story. And it's okay.
Yeah.
That's one thing.
Right.
That's one thing.
Yeah,
because I mean, if you talk about what story do you tell? How do you find your stories? And that will be different for each kind of person.
Yes.
Someone has a dream that is so vivid that you try to recapture it, and because there's something in there, and you make these sketches and see how that can work. Now that figure has to be moved, whatever, to make things stronger in between the characters, etc. Or there can be a specific myth, or there can be something that you see in the street, or something that strikes you.
That's the thing, something that strikes you.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental thing.
Yeah, and I think that's on a very basic level. Don't think what is most easy in the beginning. Think, what have I the lust for?
Yes.
Because then you will be able to go through all the striving.
Yeah.
But I think McKee, the fantastic thing about McKee is that he has these basic questions that you can ask. I forget. I'll not try to find it right now. You remember? It's like what does this character want?
Yeah. First, which are the characters, and then what do the characters want? Why do they want that? How do they going to achieve that they want? What are the obstacles that they will face in order to achieve what they want? And what are the consequences of getting what they want? So it grounds everything in a kind of, it puts you in a godlike position, in which you have to know everything about your characters, what has happened before, what's happening, and what will happen. So it brings total responsibility of knowing each one of their relations or their intentions of how, why, what, and what they were facing.
Because you can, you know, if you have an idea of composition, telling a story, okay, in painting, of course, composition.
Yeah.
It might be a trap. I don't know if that's a huge thing for a lot of painters or whatever, but I'm just thinking it might be a trap that you are very concerned with the placement of the figures solely, and not, well, is it logical? Is there some reaction between these figures here going on there? Because you have to know what is, well, this is all, McKee is talking about it, Blake Snyder is talking about it. What is the genre you're working in?
Yes.
What is this, the nature of the story? Because in a simple portrait, there are different demands than in a multi-figure composition, on a full-scale composition, right? And I think reading McKee can help you also when you're working with, you know, more simple stuff.
Yes.
For example, because it has to do with, you know, he talks about it, story doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a lot of action going on, things happening. And in the painting, not necessarily a lot of gesticulation and these things. It can be a fairly simple portrait, but you have to know what is the direction of this genre, and how do you underline that. And I was thinking that I'm working on a self-portrait with a hand to my head like this. And it's been a problem for a long time. And I started playing around with something happening in the background. It's like, you know, just sort of avoiding the problem. Like, can I give some deepness into this painting by adding something in the background? And of course, what I end up with is, okay, I have to go back, fix the face, because first of all, the face is not correct. And then the hand is not correct. And the body has to be secure, and then maybe I can add some other elements that underline that. But then that's a situation where the story that you want to tell is fairly simple. So don't run over that story with a huge truck full of effects, right?
Yes.
And I think that's also one thing that is very concerned with, that you have to know the effects that you use have to help the story. And but that's when I read that he says that there's too much focus on spectacle and less focus on substance, and it has to be more focus on substance rather than spectacle. So instead of trying to impress the audience through this and that and that, has to be substance on the plot. So then you don't go and miss trying to think about which special effects I can use on this film in order to keep the attention from the audience, so they don't go to sleep. Exactly, that was what I was doing in that self-portrait. I was trying to do some special effects, bam, bam, you know, a bit like, not that.
But you know that there's something wrong there. I shouldn't go into special effects if I do not know
why are the special effects there.
About.
I mean, and there's such a. That was just amazing to read. He quotes Hitchcock. Saying something like, when the screenplay has been made and the dialogue added, then we start shooting. That is just amazing. You have the story, the action going on, and then they have to say something to each other, right? But it's not that's not where you start. You have to start, if this person does that, how does the other one react?
Yes.
And, you know, so if you're talking about the story encompassing more figures, obviously you have to know, well, what does that guy want? How is the other one stopping him from getting it? Or whatever the story is, right?
Yes, and all the possibilities of interaction. So you have to have a kind of a sitting all the time in front of the image if there are many characters involved, and trying to figure out what is the outcome of this, and how are the reactions from this character to that character, and keeping at the same time the line of the main plot, which he points out that it's a very essential thing to it's coming from opposites, like coming from a negative to a positive.
Yeah, each scene, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
When it talks about the movie scene, going from negative to positive, positive to negative.
Yeah, and the whole arc plot, he puts it at an arc plot as a sort of an archetypical.
Yeah.
As a maximum level of a plot. Yeah. And then it goes from a negative to positive or from positive to negative, but has to be a conflict in order to make the dynamic of transition between this stage and the other. Yeah. So I think that's a very good start point to come out with the story in a painting. The character that I'm presenting, what is his background? What is he going through? What he has gone through? What is that he wants, and how he is going to do it? And then the obstacles that he is going to confront, and then what maybe the possible irreversible consequences and result of going through that process of transformation. So then conflict is the thing that puts everything in movement. So there cannot be a story without a conflict. And I found that so wonderful, because in an environment in which we are nowadays, in which they are kind of to prevent any kind of conflict in a conversation or a dialogue, then you are kind of not allowing stories to grow. But doing that, of course, some people will react to it and they will say, I don't like this.
But that's also a very good way to analyze if you have, I mean, he talks about how, you have this scene has to go from negative to positive or the other way around. And then you have a sequence of scenes that has to be topped by a more drastic turn of events. And then those built into acts. And then you have the whole story, the end of the story has to be the absolute peak of what is happening.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, you can say that, well, at least when it comes to sort of physical action in a painting, the motif that you choose in that case should be the very peak of the action going on, after which nothing else, everything goes down, or it can't get better or whatever. I mean, it depends on if it's a idyllic painting or some kind of tragic thing going on, right?
Yeah, I think that's to aim for that peak on the image that you're doing. In a way, you are being very clear about what has drawn the character to go through that, and then what is the outcome of that decision. Yeah. So I think in a painting, one should aim for that peak of a story, but of course it's very difficult.
Yeah, and then again you're talking about what genre is it? Is it just a nice atmosphere? Is that the theme?
No,
because it could be, right?
It could be,
because it could be just a summer's idyllic landscape or whatever. Yeah, and but the point is, or McKee's point of this is that it doesn't have to be a lot of things happening, but you have to know if the story is that it's a very nice, wonderful atmosphere. Well, you need to know how to build up under that. Yeah, and not starting with special effects.
You have to just take that out as much as possible, and that Aristotle goes give you that advice on his Poetics that avoid any kind of spectacle or spices that you want to add there, like a nice costume or a nice background there, but just focus on the plot and maybe with few characters, and to from there you start building up. So, well, we have talked about that before, that in the Poetics he says that the young poet falls into that mistake very often, that he, instead of making a solid, very well structured plot, he goes more for the things around, like a good actress and a good background there painted, or the effects around it. So it's better to take those out and have a more solid plot structure than to don't have that and too many special effects and go things around.
Yeah, and it's McKee talks about how the sort of the filmatic effects must not draw attention to themselves. When he mentions like CGI, computer generated images.
Yeah,
you can use that in the film, but don't draw all the attention to that, because then that's the point and not the actual story, because that is the human interrelation.
He gives the example of Forrest Gump also, and with this CGI. That you can use very finely, and it works, but it doesn't draw attention to itself. I mean, it's like we saw Wagner in Spoleto, and Odd Nerdrum was exhibiting there, and the way it was made was so wonderful, because the costumes were based on Odd's paintings. Yeah, but then in the background, that was not CGI, but just video. Clouds moving very slowly behind. You know, and it was not an effect. It was just the clouds going there. Yeah. You don't need more than that. But if the plot is clear, that's fine. I mean, with the Memorosa group, we have this one of the dogmas that we paint stories, and then you have to kind of bring this, and also another dogma is to represent the life of the past, present, and future combined. So we are trying to condense all these maybe isolated events or these things that could happen randomly into a very harmonic, well-ordered sequence of events that creates meaning. And I think, in a way, that's how we operate psychologically as human beings, that we tend to see our life or the events of the past interconnected and very well ordered, that what we are now is a result of the sum of all those things, very well placed. However, we feel ourselves good or in a bad situation, but everything feels connected in a way that it's totally right that we are in the situation that we are now. Yeah. And then all the events that will come after from here will be ordered also in a way that I will achieve or not what I'm aiming for. So in a way, psychologically we operate that as human beings. And I think it's not coincidence when people get together or they just a couple or a group of friends that they meet each other on the bar or in a house on a party or whatever. They tell each other their stories. Where are you from? I come from here, and I've been through this and through that, and then through all these things I'm here. Wow. Yeah, and they say, wow, only if you're a good storyteller. Because I mean, someone can say, you know, I had to deal with this problem this morning. I mean, the pipe of where the shower, where I have my shower, has broken up, and then suddenly all this water came out, and I had to just run out from my house and just ask and scream, who has a pipe, or go to my neighbor and ask him, and then it was, and the whole thing develops in a story that everyone says, wow, yes, I have been kind of through that situation. It's
recognizable. Yeah.
Recognizable.
I think.
But sometimes a person can actually say, you know, my mother died yesterday, and I kind of went to the funeral, and she was very peaceful when at the funeral in the coffin, and everyone is just waiting for when this man is going to stop talking about this. I mean, so the most meaningful thing and the most strong feeling in life can go down if it's not well told. And the most ordinary thing can lift up into a great story if it's well told. And I think he managed to explain what are the principles about how to bring something that appears to be so ordinary into something higher, archetypical or eternal. While other things, they are not told in a proper way, people don't pay attention at all.
Yeah, and I think, but then there's also a question of, I mean, if you take that questions seriously, how do you get your story? I mean, you can ask those questions and start to look for, events that have affected you.
Yes,
but you can also read, like if you're reading some myth.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that I remember talked about in Iceland quite a few years ago. This thing about the original myth, like in the myth behind the myth, sort of before the local coloring of the culture where it arises, and to go back to that situation and try to find, if you get an idea and you are gripped by a certain story or a novel or whatever, then you can use McKee's questions and find out to be really sure that you've understood the story. What does the protagonist want? What is at stake? And try to, but also to sort of doctor your own painting if you don't know exactly where it's going. Ask these questions and clarify which direction it's going.
Yes.
And then you can really find what needs to be done, right? And if you have like some specific myth that you are gripped by, you can of course make it exactly those persons. But if you really understand at the bottom of it what is at stake, you can perhaps even make an even stronger story. Yeah, I think. This is what Titian did that sort of both things at once. Then in Marcius. Yeah. Which is Marcius, but which is not just Marcius.
It's not that, and then it happens a bit maybe with the same with the Prodigal Son by Rembrandt. That it becomes this very strong archetypical image of the young man going out into the world and then coming back after all that struggle and longing for that embrace with his.
And that's a high value at stake. Yeah, that's a high value at stake.
And then you see all the other representations of the Prodigal Son from other painters, and all of them, or at least the ones that I have seen, they look like stereotypical, cheap presentations of the theme. Very much focus on the drapery and the background and all these things that tells you that it's from that time. But in Rembrandt, everything is taken away, and what is kept is the essential, that final embrace where the son comes back, and it becomes like this strong representation of the subject that you kind of see. Okay, this man really understood what is the whole story is about. So that's, I think, what McKee talks about. Stereotypes versus archetypes. Stereotype is not an integrated story. You are not really into it, so you just take pre-digested forms and you put them together and you bring it like that as a cliche. But archetypical, it's something that you are dreaming for, and you have a real desire, which is the main source of making a story, and that desire comes out from where I don't know, but the desire or the will to represent that story or that archetype is something that you have to know it very well. So your story or the way you represent it doesn't fall into a stereotypical, ordinary, vulgar way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's where you also get back to painting a simple portrait. I mean, the thing that you need to know is, well, McKee talks about it too, what to include and what to exclude.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn to know what, builds up on the story. And if you have a simple portrait, then what is the story? Is it the eyes looking at you? Or is it the mouth breathing?
Yeah.
Or is it the ear hearing? Or is it, what is the focus there?
Yeah.
And I think if you can grasp that, then you can start building that onto many more figures, right?
Yes, and with the self-portrait also, Odd has talked about that before, being a sort of an actor.
Yeah.
So he also talks about that the background of many script writers or storytellers, theater has been kind of their common ground. So many of them come from the theater world. So with the self-portrait, when you start playing with the characters, like one day I'm a king, one day I'm a dog, one day I'm a beggar, one day I'm sick, one day I'm a strong man, yeah. Then you start developing to put yourself in different characters. And when you are aiming for a bigger story, which you will have to deal with several characters in a scene, then you already have a kind of you have put yourself into different roles, and then you can put yourself again into those roles and play
in one painting.
Yeah. So it's an exercise. I think it's an exercise of empathy. It's an exercise of putting yourself in the shoes of another one, and through that loving them and suffering with them. So when you are making a big composition with a lot of character, you care about them, because you are being through that.
Thank you for checking out this clip from the Cave of Apelles. If you want to watch the entire segment, head over to caveofapelles.com/donate and become a $5 patron. That will allow you to access all our Dark Flame episodes, bonus material with our featured guests, and more.